Hello, and welcome to the Michigan Alliance for Families on-demand webinar, Transition: What You Need to Know. My name is Karen Wang, and I am the Transition Specialist for Michigan Alliance for Families. Michigan Alliance for Families provides free parent training and information all across the state of Michigan for families of students who are eligible to receive or may be eligible to receive special education supports and services. By the end of our workshop today, you will have an understanding of what transition planning is and why it's important, what should happen during the transition planning process, because transition isn't just a single event, but rather it's a process that takes years to carry out. And we'll talk about what type of work parents and others contribute to that process, options for life when school is done, and community resources that you can use to make the most out of the transition planning. All of us here at Michigan Alliance for Families have or had a family member with an IEP, so each step of the process that I'm about to share is something that I have already experienced with my own adult son. There are many types of transitions throughout life, but the transition I'm focusing on today is the transition from special education to adult services. It can be scary to think about a student's eventual exit from the school system, but with careful planning as a team, it is possible for our young adults to live a fulfilling life in the wider community. We know that all students need guidance in order to make that leap from high school to the next step. But oftentimes for students with disabilities, that leap requires much more planning, whether that's for college, a career, a job, or some type of independent living. We also know that the percentage of students with disabilities who attend college is low, and the percentage of adults with disabilities who are employed is also very low. One of the ways we can change that is by changing our expectations of students with disabilities while they're still in school, and by understanding how the transition planning process can be used to explore every possibility. For post-secondary life, transition planning is a required part of the IEP starting during the year the student will turn 16, according to the federal law IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But transition planning can start earlier if the IEP team decides it's appropriate to do so. Some organizations recommend starting transition planning at age 14 or even earlier, rather than 16, but 16 is still the required age. The purpose of transition planning is to get everyone thinking about the student's vision for their own life and to coordinate activities that will help them make that vision a reality. It should be totally focused on the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, their spin. And the process should be collaborative. That means that even though the school facilitates the process and handles the paperwork, students and families will be actively involved in this process and working together with the school to make it happen. The transition plan gets reviewed every year at the annual IEP, but in between meetings, there will be ongoing assessments of how things are going, and there will be activities to do all along the way. I want to point out here that transition planning is intended to evolve as the students' needs grow and change. So I really want you to consider transition planning to be a continuous process that gets updated along the way. Before I go any further, I'm going to take a moment to rewind a few years to middle school, well before the student's IEP team starts the official transition planning process. The Michigan Merit Curriculum is our state's set of academic standards for high school graduation, and it requires that all students in 7th grade, both with and without disabilities, start an Educational Development Plan, or EDP. The purpose of the EDP is to help students explore career interests and develop an action plan for reaching their goals. The EDP gets started in 7th grade and it must be completed in 8th grade before the student goes to high school. Now, schools can use a variety of formats to develop EDPs, including web-based systems that introduce students to different career pathways, offering a short class where the EDP will be developed, and/or meeting with a counselor one-on-one. The idea is to help students think about long-term education and career plans before entering high school. By going through this process, students learn more about themselves, they consider different options for their future, and they decide on what classes to take in high school. It might lead to a vocational technical program in high school, or business classes, or hands-on engineering classes. Some students can't imagine their lives without music or art or drama. It helps students make a connection between what they're doing in high school and what they want to do when school is done. Information from the EDP can also be used to assist in transition planning for students with IEPs. The EDP gets reviewed and updated every year, usually with the student's counselor. EDPs also include the student's future goals concerning work and education, and then some summary information about what activities and work experiences the student has been involved in already. Now, here comes the part about family collaboration. Throughout this presentation, I have slides headlined in red and marked as action items. These are activities that the student and the family will do at home to prepare for the transition to adulthood. The school team will not be able to take most of these steps on behalf of the student. At age 14, the first item is to make sure the student has a Social Security card. This will be needed when the student starts pre-employment transition services in school. As the student considers employment and life in the community, it's also time to start learning about public transportation and how to get around town as independently as possible. Some cities that do not have a bus system do have some type of paratransit system for senior citizens and people with disabilities. Start tracking down these resources in your community. If your student is planning to learn to drive, Segment 1 of driver's education can start at age 14 years and 8 months in Michigan. Consider what type of adaptive equipment your student may need for driving. Also at age 14, consider getting the student into the habit of wearing some type of medical alert bracelet or necklace, such as a medical tag that's worn under clothing. Many students don't need this, but if your student has epilepsy or a severe allergy or a history of panic attacks or communicates nonverbally, it may become necessary. One of my son's physicians recommended a bracelet like this, and it turned out to be very helpful for my son in a real emergency situation. I noticed that the EMTs immediately checked to see if he had a medical alert tag. People are generally more likely to wear a medical alert tag every day if they get into the habit at an early age. Community activities will become increasingly important as your student approaches adulthood. This is the ideal time for your student to practice real-life activities, such as checking out books at the library, paying for a cup of hot chocolate at the cafe, or selecting and paying for groceries. It's also the ideal time for you and your student to identify strengths, preferences, interests, and needs as they get older. At Michigan Alliance for Families, we like to use the acronym SPIN to talk about this part of transition planning. So maybe your student is a Marvel superfan and dreams of working at a movie theater. There are specific skills to learn that can make that dream a reality. If your student needs a quiet environment and feels at home in libraries and museums, that will have to become part of the transition planning somehow. Every person's spin on life is unique. Every transition plan will also be unique to meet the needs of that one person. We'll keep referring back to spin throughout this presentation. So now your student has their educational development plan and they're starting to think about life after school. The law that governs special education, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, requires that IEP teams take that planning a step further by requiring the transition planning process. Transition planning is not a one-time event. It's a process that changes with the needs of the student over many years. The transition planning process has several steps and components. It's not a straight line from point A to point B, but it does have a beginning and an end goal. It starts with assessments. Again, the educational development plan gets completed in 8th grade for every student, regardless of disability. And transition planning starts, at the latest, in the year that the student with an IEP turns 16. Then there will be additional assessments to identify the student's long-term strengths, preferences, interests, and needs into adulthood, the SPIN. The team, which includes the student and the family, will use the results of those assessments to create measurable post-secondary goals. With those goals in mind, the team plans out a course of study for high school. So there's a big difference between a vocational technical course of study and a pre-business course of study, for example. Transition services can be provided by the school or vocational rehabilitation agency or other agencies, depending on what the student's goals are. Now, these steps don't necessarily have to occur in this exact order, and if the student's needs or preferences change, it's always possible to go back and redo one or a few of these steps. When the student turns 18, coordinating adult services will become a priority. We'll go in depth through each of these steps during the presentation today. IDEA has required that transition plans must include these 4 components: data from transition assessments, measurable post-secondary goals, services to reach those goals, and information about the transfer of rights at the age of majority. The IEP must also contain, if appropriate, a statement of each public agency and participating agency's responsibilities, including financial responsibilities, for the transition activities. I'll talk more about each of these things in detail as the presentation goes on, but this ensures a process that is ongoing. The student and family and their teachers gauge the student's interests and progress in school. Goals are developed with the student's vision in mind. A plan for services and activities gets put into place, and students get informed about their rights once they turn 18. As I mentioned earlier, the transition planning process must be student-focused. The student's SPIN, their strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, must be considered every step of the way. And the best person to advocate for those things is the student. Yes, including students who do not communicate verbally. For many young people and adults, Participating in IEP meetings can feel intimidating, so preparation and practice are essential. So there are many ways to prepare for and many ways to participate in the IEP and the transition plan before the IEP meeting. Teachers and families should talk with the students about their interests and their vision for life. Students can also prepare materials to share during the meeting. I've seen students prepare a PowerPoint presentation that they show at the start of the meeting, which really does set the agenda and the tone for the whole meeting. PowerPoint presentations don't need to be anything fancy. They can be basic or they can include as much detail as the student would like. But the idea is to get everyone focused on the student and their input. Some students might show pictures depicting their strengths and their goals. A student could even activate a switch to begin a slide presentation. Or if the student is passionate about music, play a favorite song at the meeting. There are also many ways to prepare and participate during the IEP meeting. Some students will memorize a few key points or have visual cues that they've prepared with their teacher to help them communicate what they want to say. Students can be provided with choice cards to indicate agreement or disagreement, or visual representations of the meeting topics so that everyone can follow along during the meeting. Sometimes the student completes a simple fill-in-the-blank form beforehand. My name is Joe. I like stories. I don't like hot dogs. At school, I need help with math. Students should be encouraged to ask questions and give opinions rather than just listening. Students can also participate in leading the meeting, which could look like introducing each section, deciding when it's time to move on, introducing the IEP team members, or giving a review of their current performance levels. We should presume that the student is able to discuss likes and dislikes. And it's okay for the student to make mistakes or to become uncomfortable. That actually gives the team more information about the student's current abilities. That's what it means to presume competence and allow the dignity of risk. Another part of self-advocacy is learning how and when to explain one's disability. I once attended a friend's IEP for moral support, and my friend admitted to the team that she had never told her 18-year-old daughter what her disability was. The meeting had to be adjourned, and it was reconvened a few weeks later after the daughter learned about her disability and her rights as an adult. Students with disabilities need to learn how to express what they can and can't do. It's a basic life skill. Start having students attend as much of their IEP meeting as possible in elementary or middle school so that they can start getting comfortable with the process. If the student's disability makes it difficult or impossible for the student to attend the whole meeting, make a plan beforehand for some type of participation that is possible. This meeting really is all about them. They're the most important person in the room, and it helps students understand how they can start advocating for themselves as they get older. Let's talk now about the first required component of transition planning, which is the transition assessments. Transition assessment is an ongoing process to gather information about the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs as they relate to future living, learning, and working environments. The assessment process starts in middle school with the EDP, and it continues until the student exits school. The information that's gathered during transition assessments is then used to guide the transition planning and IEP process. Some people like to think of this step as answering the questions, where are we now? What are the students' interests at this point in time? What do they know now about the career or job they're interested in? And how are their work and study habits? Usually when we hear the word assessment, we think of something formal like standardized tests, but transition assessments should include lots of different things. Reviewing work samples to learn about academic strengths and the most frequently used accommodations. Having conversations with students and their families to get a clear idea of their vision for the future, or to help students figure out what their vision might be. It can be observations of the student to see if they're on task, following directions, and getting along with others. There can be interest inventories and questionnaires to help narrow down interests, to find out about past work-related experiences, and to get an idea of what the student feels their strengths and their areas where they want to grow might be. And finally, standardized assessments can also be a component of transition assessments to help gather information about the student's interests and skills. A couple of standardized assessments that I've seen used very frequently are career cruising and the Student Transition Assessment Tool, or STAT-R. But there are many other tools that are on the market. If you hear information that doesn't make sense to you when you're in a transition planning meeting, or if you don't understand transition assessment scores that are being reported, you should ask for clarification or context. You can also ask what sorts of informal assessments were done if you're only hearing scores. If you're going through the transition plan, but you're feeling like something is just missing, you can ask for different assessments, and you can ask for different information gathering to be done, and set a date by which you'll reconvene and look at an updated transition plan. These assessments really do provide a starting point for the whole team and inform the entire process, including developing some goals. So here are some more action items that students and their families can work on at home. At age 16, the IEP transition planning process has started, and it's time to think about future employment. Part of that is getting a state-issued photo ID or a driver's license if your student is learning to drive. And since you're going to be at the Secretary of State office anyway, consider if your student might need a disability parking permit. Michigan has some of the strictest laws in the nation about who is eligible for disability parking permits. The law says that the person must have a permanent disability that affects mobility. This applies to people who use wheelchairs, of course, and it also applies to people with seizure disorders, chronic pain, legal blindness, issues with balance or coordination, and people who may run off in a parking lot. Eligibility is determined by the person's doctor, not the Secretary of State. It's a simple one-page application for a permit. The top half is filled out by the applicant, and the bottom half is completed by the physician. Also at age 16, it's a good idea to review and revise the transition goals. So maybe there was a significant change in the student's medical condition. That happened to my own son. Did the student learn to use an alternative communication device, making it possible to earn a diploma? Did the student develop a completely new area of interest with a different career goal? Will the student need extra time in high school to complete all of the graduation requirements? It's also a great time to explore career interests through job training or a part-time job. Some high school classes might visit local businesses or bring in business owners to speak in class. You could volunteer to plant flowers for a nonprofit. Maybe a family friend will allow your student to shadow them for a day, or start applying for part-time jobs. At age 16, your student can start thinking about a plan for graduation. What do they need to what do they still need to do to reach the finish line? Are they going for a diploma or a certificate of completion? How can they make the most of their time remaining in high school? And what will happen at the actual graduation ceremony? Not everyone wants to sit in a big auditorium and walk with the rest of the school. I know a student who is legally blind and highly sensitive to noise. He requested and received a private graduation ceremony with the principal, superintendent, and his teachers to honor his achievement. Now for the next step of the transition planning process. Once the assessments are done, the teacher will put together a draft transition plan as part of the annual IEP that gets reviewed and discussed during the IEP meeting. As I said a few moments ago, the information gathered through assessments, conversations, and observations is used to develop post-secondary goals. Post-secondary goals are the second required part of transition planning. These are goals to be accomplished after exiting school. These goals will not be accomplished during school because the intent is to plan for the future when school is over. So post-secondary goals are meant for the long term, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. But they're reviewed and revised annually at the student's IEP. These goals must be written in each of the 4 following areas: education, training, employment, and independent living if applicable. These are going to be long-term goals for living, working, and learning as an adult. The projected post-secondary goals in the student's IEP will establish a direction for the school, the student, and their family, and others to move toward. Again, having students participate in setting these goals is key. Students need to be invested in the goals because it's all about their strengths, their preferences, their interests, their needs. Students and their families should talk about their vision for the future and be sure to share it with the school and keep repeating it. As I mentioned, the transition plan will usually already have post-secondary goals written in when you get to the meeting. Even though students and parents need to be involved in developing these goals, sometimes that input gets overlooked. Know that what you see when you get to the meeting is a draft, and it can be changed based on what is discussed during the meeting. Also, keep in mind that transition goals will probably change several times as your child's interests develop through the years, and that's okay. The process of transition planning allows time for exploration and maturity so that your students' goals can start off broad and become more specific as they grow and develop. Transition goals are reviewed and updated every year along with the rest of the IEP. While assessments can be thought of as answering the question, where are we now? The post-secondary goals will help answer the question, where are we going? So here I have some examples under each category. For education and training, a few examples of goals could be to attend a 4-year college for business management, on-the-job training at Detroit Metro Airport, or a skill building program to learn time management, which is what my own son is doing at this very moment. Some examples of employment for a long-term post-secondary goal would be working part-time at a pet store while attending a 2-year college, and then after graduating, working full-time as a vet tech. Or working at the local hospital with a job coach. That's another example of an employment goal. For independent living goals, those could include something like living independently in an apartment, scheduling appointments, paying bills, and accessing services in the community by using public transportation. Another example of a long-term post-secondary goal could be to prepare for each day by dressing and feeding oneself with assistance. Sometimes it helps when developing post-secondary goals to think about creating a life and a schedule that runs separately from one's parents. Even if the student is planning on living in their family home for the foreseeable future, there is an opportunity here to visualize and plan for a life that runs independently of their parents. So at this point, some families will start asking me, what do you mean by independent living? Because my child is never going to be able to do that. I have two responses to that statement. First, never say never. We cannot predict what our adult children may or may not be able to do in the future. Second, independent living means a lot of different things. The term independent living was born in the 1960s as a way to describe life outside of institutions. Disability activists founded this movement on four principles: choice, control over one's own life, freedom, and equality with non-disabled persons. Depending on the nature of a person's disability, those principles could mean living in an apartment with 24/7 support or sharing a home with compatible roommates. Oftentimes, it means living with parents and paying monthly rent. Independent living doesn't just mean where, but also how a person lives. Choosing the services that fit their needs the best. Does the person need physical therapy or maybe just some home help in the morning to get started and out the door? It also applies to everyday decisions like choosing the groceries that a person likes best and learning to prepare meals, or scheduling medical appointments and remembering to vacuum the living room. Independent living includes participating in community activities that a person enjoys. So maybe a yoga class, or swimming at the lake, or attending weekly worship services, or going to the farmer's market, and having the same access to those activities that people without disabilities have. So instead of saying, oh, my child will never be able to live independently, we can ask the transition team, what are the students' barriers to independent living, and what can we do as a team to remove those barriers? Here we are at another action item for students and families. Many post-secondary goals are related to employment, and this is where it becomes necessary to work with an agency outside of school. Each state in the USA is required to have a vocational rehabilitation agency to help people with disabilities achieve their employment goals. In Michigan, we have Michigan Rehabilitation Services, MRS, which assists most people with disabilities, and the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, BSBP, which is specifically for people with visual impairments or deafblindness. In addition, a federal law called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, also provides training for youth with disabilities. The WIOA programs in Michigan are implemented through the Michigan Works Agency. The contact information for each of these organizations is listed here so that you can request the services at the appropriate time. Go ahead and take a screenshot of this slide so that you can keep the numbers handy. People with disabilities become eligible for pre-employment transition services, or pre-ETS, starting at age 14. Depending on the student's needs, these services may include assistance with writing a resume and filling out a job application, instruction on appropriate social skills for employment, and eventually placement in a paid work experience. Once the student has a caseworker at one of these agencies, the caseworker can be invited to IEP meetings to provide guidance on post-secondary goals, course of study, and transition services. Now that assessments have been completed and post-secondary goals have been written, it's time to answer the question, how will we get there? And that brings us to course of study. While the law doesn't require transition planning to start until the year the student turns 16, we know that conversations about diploma versus certificate of completion will start much earlier. It would be ideal for the post-secondary goals to drive this conversation, but if your student is already in their sophomore or junior year of high school, the reality is that it's most likely already been discussed. The first course of study is what many consider a traditional course of study, exiting high school with a diploma. This involves meeting the Michigan Merit Curriculum standards, as well as any standards set by your local high school, and graduating with a diploma. In this case, school services will end when the diploma is issued. Some of you may have heard the next term, personal curriculum, before. Personal curriculum is a tool for modifying the rigor of the Michigan Merit Curriculum if it is determined that the student's disability is the reason they're not able to access or demonstrate proficiency in the content. Personal curriculum is not exclusively a special education provision. Any student has the right to explore options in a personal curriculum, but students with IEPs are eligible. In Michigan, students who have IEPs may also be eligible to continue working toward a diploma until age 26. If a student needs extra time to earn a high school diploma, then that should be discussed with the IEP team. And then, of course, career and technical education is an option and needs to be presented as an option by the school. So there are multiple paths and configurations that can lead to a diploma. The intent of the Michigan Department of Education is to make a diploma accessible for as many students as possible. The second option for course of study is to exit high school without a diploma. This is widely referred to as obtaining a certificate of completion. It's different from exiting with a diploma because there's no established curriculum. Rather, the student's post-secondary goals in their transition plan will drive course selections and everything else. For example, a student might choose a cooking and nutrition class, or photography, or a science elective like geology. It's all about the student's spin. Students with IEPs who do not earn a diploma may be eligible for school services in Michigan to age 26. Career and technical education can also be a part of the student's course of study, even if they are not earning a diploma. Now, some students will start high school on the diploma track, and after 2 or 3 semesters, it may become apparent that the student will be unable to complete diploma requirements, even with a personal curriculum and other accommodations. So those students would switch to a certificate of completion course of study. But I also want you to know that it's possible for things to happen the other way around. A student may start on a certificate track, but then after the student learns to use augmentative communication or learns to read Braille or gets a sign language interpreter in class, the student may be able to switch to a diploma course of study and perhaps even continue to college. This is why it's essential to review and update the student's spin every year. I want to take a moment here to consider the concept of dignity of risk. As parents of children with disabilities, many of us get into the permanent mindset of keeping our children safe and healthy. I know that my own son's health permeates my conscious and subconscious thoughts all day, every night for 22 years already. I want to protect my son from negative consequences. But when I do that, I'm also preventing him from learning from his mistakes. Years ago, someone told me, every time you do something for your child, you are preventing him from learning that skill. In other words, I'm forcing my son to stay dependent on me. I'm preventing him from achieving the principles of independent living. Now, I know that I made lots of stupid decisions when I was growing up and starting on my own as an adult. All of us here probably did too. Dignity of risk means that every person deserves the opportunity to learn from their own mistakes. That's how we grow on an emotional and intellectual level. Every person has the right to decide how to achieve their personal goals. The term dignity of risk certainly conjures up a worst-case scenario like the one seen here. But really, it's the little decisions like, should I clean my room this morning or watch silly cat videos, that develop into bigger decisions such as, what type of job do I need so that I can rent my own studio apartment? So that's your action item. Allow your student the dignity of making decisions that are meaningful to them. Transition services are the next required component of transition planning. Transition services are a set of activities which help the student move toward achieving their post-secondary goals. It's important to know that many of the transition services or activities stated in the transition plan will take place outside of school. They'll be at home or in the community. The purpose of the transition assessments, the post-secondary goals, and the course of study is to prepare the student for life in the community. And because it's outside of school, this is where our students need support from their home team. Transition services need to be identified under the same 4 core areas that the post-secondary goals address: education and training, employment, and independent living if applicable. These services and activities must be based again on the student's needs and goals, accounting for their strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, their SPIN. This is why I always recommend starting every IEP with a statement of the student's unique spin on life. Transition services should include the activities that the student will complete with assistance from both the school and community agencies. Their community of adults can include their special or general education teachers, related service providers, school counselors, or other school personnel, outside community agencies, family members, and other important people in the student's life. Any or all of these people can be invited to participate in the student's IEP. I want to emphasize again that transition services are not a one-time thing. It's a process that's designed to get results. And the result we're looking for is a fulfilling life as an adult. So maybe one of the transition services is volunteering on Saturday afternoons at a food pantry, or helping with a disabilities awareness badge for Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or joining a bowling league. It's all about your student's unique spin on life. Here are some examples of transition services under each of the 4 core areas: education, training, employment, and independent living. Examples of transition services under the education category could include instruction and modeling, how to advocate for oneself in class, getting some direct instruction in math, or taking a college tour. Some examples of services under training may include study skills training, a social skills workshop, or practicing requesting accommodations. Under employment, some transition services could be learning to follow a daily visual schedule, getting some community work experience, or getting a referral to vocational rehabilitation, which I explained earlier. And finally, some examples of transition services for independent living might include to learn and master use of adaptive switches for kitchen appliances so that they can prepare meals, or adaptive equipment for a car if your student has mobility issues and is learning to drive, to memorize a phone number or getting direct instruction in practical math skills like money and making change. And in the picture below, learning to use the public library is a great skill for independent living. In fact, it's one of my son's favorite activities. By the time the transition plan portion of the IEP wraps up, you should have a clear understanding of what activities each person is going to attempt or accomplish by a certain time. If there are activities that families or students are having difficulty completing, the IEP team needs to reconvene and make a plan for assisting the family. It's ideal for the student, their family, and the school to work together and collaborate on getting these things done. If you need help or if you have questions, reach out to the teacher and let them know. If you feel like your IEP team needs some support with transition planning, reach out to your district special education administrator. Many times that person can offer creative thinking and support you and the school team on how to plan and get things done. So we've hit on 3 of the required components of transition planning under IDEA: the assessments, post-secondary goals, and transition services. Now let's talk for a moment about the 4th requirement, which includes information about what's called the transfer of rights at the age of majority. On or before a student's 17th birthday, schools must tell students that when they turn 18, they will be an adult and will have certain rights. While their parents were in charge of making decisions before then, turning 18 means that the parents do not automatically have that authority anymore. All students, regardless of their level of disability, must be informed of this. Information should be delivered in a way that the student can understand. So, what are those rights? You can find a more thorough list of student rights online, but I want to point out a few for you here. First, students always have the right to attend their own IEP meeting, regardless of age or level of disability. At age 18, they also have the right to invite anyone they choose to the meeting, and they have a right to provide input for their IEP as a member of the team. When students turn 18, they have the right to give permission for testing and evaluations. And then on the flip side of that, they have the right to deny permission for testing or evaluations. They have the right to access school records, and they have a right to disagree with the IEP team and to pursue dispute resolution options. Finally, the student can give permission to share records with outside agencies such as Vocational Rehabilitation or the medical team. Those were the rights. Now for the responsibilities. At age 18, every doctor's office, every service agency, every job application is going to ask about a state-issued photo ID. Your student will absolutely need to have one by this age, so schedule that appointment with the Secretary of State. 18-year-olds can also register to vote, and that can be done through the Secretary of State or your town clerk's office or another statewide program such as the Michigan Combined Application Project, MICAP, for adults with disabilities. People with disabilities are valuable constituents and they have the right to vote just like anyone else. Poll workers are not qualified to determine someone's capacity to vote, and a person with a disability cannot be turned away from the polls. Mail-in ballots are another way to access the voting process. All 18-year-old males must register with the Selective Service, also known as the military draft, regardless of their disability. It's a simple one-page form online. If it ever becomes necessary for the USA to use the military draft program again, people with disabilities will be screened and they may be deemed ineligible at the time their number comes up. Every adult has legal control over medical, financial, and educational decisions. If your 18-year-old has a medical emergency, you will not be allowed in the emergency room without permission. It's time to come up with a plan to support your student with decision-making and exercising their rights. I'll go over those options a few slides from now. There are also some more abstract responsibilities to consider at this age. When is it appropriate for your student to disclose their disability? How will your student know that someone is trustworthy and avoid being taken advantage of? If a parent is unavailable, who can the student go to for help? This is all part of the self-advocacy skill set that should have been started several years earlier and reinforced and expanded. And now we have another action item. With all of the rights and responsibilities for your young adult officially starting on the 18th birthday, it will become necessary to get your documents in order well in advance. When your young adult applies for benefits and adult services, this is what you'll need. A birth certificate, social security card, and photo ID are the basic forms of identification. Some agencies may request an IQ test for some types of disabilities. My own son had his IQ test done with MRS at no cost to us. When agencies require proof of a disability, they will also request a copy of the most recent IEP, a multidisciplinary evaluation, and a letter signed by a physician regarding the nature of the disability and its impact on the person's ability to work. Starting on the 18th birthday, it's also time to consider how to support your young adult in making decisions. In school, we talk about providing the least restrictive environment for our students with disabilities. In adulthood, we have to consider the least restrictive method for decision making. Now, guardianship is the most restrictive method because it involves taking rights away from a person. Supported decision-making agreements and power of attorney allow a person to retain their civil rights while also supporting them. Because the wait time for a guardianship hearing in most parts of Michigan is about 18 to 20 months, you will have time to explore alternatives to guardianship and find the best fit for your young adult. Most attorneys can help you with a power of attorney document for a fixed fee. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney, there are simple power of attorney templates available online or at your local library. If your young adult plans to apply for Supplemental Security Income, SSI, they will need some type of signed residential lease. Again, look for a lease template online or ask at your local library. The reason your young adult will need a lease is that free room and board is considered in-kind support and maintenance by the Social Security Administration. In other words, it's a gift, and it will be counted as income and therefore deducted from the monthly SSI payment. You can customize a lease template to say that your young adult is renting a room in your home with full access to common areas and storage space. This is considered a type of independent living. If your young adult is applying for SSI, you will also need a complete list of assets in your young adult's name, and those assets may not exceed $2,000 under current federal law. At age 18, the parents' or guardian's names must be removed from the applicant's assets, or else the joint account owner's full income will be considered in the SSI application. These are common pitfalls that lead to denial of SSI benefits, and we will discuss these topics further. Okay, we've gone over the 4 components of transition planning: assessments, post-secondary goals, the course of study, and transition services, including the age of majority conversation. All of these components should fit together to make one cohesive transition plan. The transition plan then becomes part of the IEP document, and IEP annual goals should then be developed that support the transition plan. The Educational Development Plan is also still in play, and it does not go away when transition planning begins. All of this should be reviewed at least annually, and it can be revised or even completely redone depending on what is most appropriate for the student's needs. If your student is not exiting school with a diploma and will be continuing with educational services to age 26, the transition planning process will continue throughout that time as well, and it is reviewed at every annual IEP. As students transition to adulthood, they and their families will start thinking about adult services. And there are so many things to consider with that. Where do we even start? How do we coordinate those services? Something you might be wondering around this time is how best to assist a person with a disability in making decisions. Every person is capable of making choices and has a right to make choices that affect them and their own life. Historically, guardianship has been the default option for many families, but more and more families are looking for alternatives. Guardianship involves taking rights away from a person with a disability and transferring those rights to someone else, and it's not always the most appropriate option. Some alternatives to guardianship are listed here. Supported decision-making agreements involve the person with a disability documenting their preferences for getting support with decisions. This is where the young adult uses their SPIN, strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, for the purpose of self-advocacy. The person would identify trusted advisors, such as friends, family members, or professionals, to serve as supporters. The supporters agree to help the person with a disability understand, consider, and communicate their decisions, and give the person with a disability the tools to make their own informed decisions. Another more well-known alternative to guardianship is power of attorney. Power of attorney is for people who want to designate someone as the person who will help them make decisions and will have access to information on their behalf. A person does not need to communicate verbally or even fully understand every word in the document in order to designate a power of attorney. To draw up power of attorney documents, you should consult with an attorney, or if you can't afford an attorney, use a template from the internet or your local library. One other tool that can be used to support someone in decision making is representative payee. This is exclusively a term for the Social Security Administration. A representative payee is the person designated to assist the person with a disability with managing their Social Security funds. So, what is SSI? SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, is a needs-based program, meaning that a person's income is considered first when determining eligibility. Total assets must be under $2,000. Our young adults must also provide proof of a permanent disability that limits their ability to work for a living wage. SSI in Michigan comes with Medicaid, and it pays for food, shelter, and personal expenses, and comes as a standard monthly amount. The current maximum for SSI at this time is $914 per month as of January 2023. A second program that is also administered by the Social Security Administration is the Retirement Survivors and Disability Insurance Program, or RSDI. This is an insurance program for people who pay into the plan through their payroll taxes. It comes with Medicare, and the amount a person receives is based on how much work they have done in the past and how much they have already paid into the insurance program. SSI is most likely going to be the program your young adult will want to apply for, since most students do not have enough work experience to be eligible for RSDI. Schools can provide some of the reports and evaluations that are helpful to the SSI application process. So starting the application while you still have that connection is very helpful. Consider putting these benefits into place sooner rather than later. Here is a step-by-step guide to apply for SSI. You may start your application either online or over the phone, but you must also attend an in-person interview after that initial screening. The date of the in-person appointment is the official date of application, and all SSI payments will be back calculated to that date of application. For the online screening, go to the website ssa.gov, and that stands for Social Security Administration. Then you'll select Apply for Benefits. It's pretty easy to get lost or confused on this website because you'll see the word disability popping up all over the place. But oftentimes the website is referring to the Retirement Survivors and Disability Insurance, or what some people call Social Security Disability. So you want to make sure that you scroll down and select Supplemental Security Income for Disability, or SSI. Then you'll complete the online application. After you submit the application, then a Social Security representative will schedule the first available in-person appointment at your local Social Security office. But if you need more flexibility in scheduling your in-person appointment, I suggest completing the initial screening over the phone with a live representative. Don't be surprised if there's a long wait. The applicant must answer some of the questions over the phone and may give permission for you to answer other questions on their behalf. You can then choose an appointment that is convenient for you at the nearest Social Security office. Whether you complete the initial screening online or over the phone, you will need to provide the applicant's legal name, date of birth, Social Security number, and contact information. When you get to the in-person appointment, you must attend with the applicant, and you need to bring copies of all necessary documents, such as birth certificate, proof of disability, a photo ID, Social Security card, and so on. There are many do's and don'ts in the SSI application process. First, do not apply for the wrong program. Students with disabilities will need SSI and Medicaid to fund their adult services. Do not make the mistake of applying for the retirement, survivor, and disability insurance. Second, since SSI is to be used for food and shelter, you'll need to think about how much you'll be charging your young adult for those things and include that information in the application process. If your young adult is not going to be paying their fair share for food or shelter, they may qualify for a reduced SSI amount or no SSI at all. So bring in those grocery receipts and the residential lease. Another necessary document is the physician's statement on the applicant's diagnosis and disability, and the disability's impact on the applicant's ability to work. If your physician's statement is incomplete, you may be referred for a medical exam by a physician who works for the Social Security Administration. This will delay your approval for SSI. Make sure to bring the applicant to the appointment, as well as copies of your documents when you are completing the application and related forms. This is not the time to focus on strengths. This is the time to focus on functional limitations. In many cases, having the applicant participate as much as possible in the interview may increase the likelihood of approval for SSI because that disability is being demonstrated right in front of the representative from Social Security. You're being asked to report on how the young adult's disability significantly limits their ability at this time to do basic work activities. If they are able to do basic work activities with support, think about what their ability to do basic work activities might be if there was no support available, and complete the application with that in mind. And remember, support can include anything from giving reminders or prompts all the way up to hand-over-hand assistance. So think about your young adult completing basic work activities with absolutely no support or prompting, and that's how you want to fill out this application. If you apply for SSI and you get denied, be sure to appeal. Maybe you forgot to bring one of the necessary documents. Many times, cases that were denied on the first attempt will get approved upon appeal. Remember that all SSI payments will be back calculated to that date of the in-person interview. Do not apply before your child turns 18. After your child turns 18, only their income and assets are considered in the application. But before age 18, every adult in the household has their income and assets considered. So again, if your child is 18 and applying for SSI, don't include parent income or asset information. Some people even try to schedule the in-person appointment on the first day of the month following the 18th birthday to allow a little time to update ownership of the savings account and get all the documents in order. Okay, I know that there are going to be a lot of questions about SSI. So some of the most frequently asked questions are, is my full-time student eligible for SSI? Yes, full-time students may be eligible for SSI depending on the student's income and the physician's statement about the nature of the disability. This can include high school students, students in an 18 to 26 program in their local school district, community college students, and four-year college students. You will have to discuss this at your in-person appointment with a Social Security representative. How does paid employment affect SSI? Well, Social Security has its own equation that gets updated every year to determine how much income will be deducted from the monthly SSI payment. There's an app for both iPhones and Androids for SSI that allows you to report your monthly income directly to the Social Security Administration, and it will tell you how much next month's payment will be based on your report. Social Security also has the Ticket to Work program to encourage SSI recipients to work with vocational rehabilitation on gradually reducing dependence on SSI and making the transition to competitive integrated employment. This is another topic to discuss at your in-person interview. So, what if your young adult is approved for SSI but doesn't spend the full amount each month? Well, total assets may not exceed $2,000 under current federal law. You can save up some of the excess and use it for recreation, out-of-pocket educational expenses. For example, my son is in a creative writing group that he loves. And you can use it to pay for any personal expense for the recipient's quality of life. Another option is to use the Michigan Achieving a Better Life Experience, MyAble, account to save funds for your young adult without being penalized by Social Security. You will have to document monthly expenses for future SSI audits. I maintain a spreadsheet with every expense itemized, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. Social Security will send you a basic blank template for expenses when your young adult is approved for SSI. I suggest doing an internet search on SSI spreadsheets and finding a template that meets your needs. Or you can just track everything in a spiral notebook and keep receipts in a different envelope for each category of expenses. If you are denied SSI the first time you apply, follow the instructions for an appeal, which will be explained in the denial letter. Some people have to reapply several times, and a few even have to go before a judge for a court order of SSI approval. Sometimes this happens even in cases of applicants who you'd think would have been immediately approved on the first attempt. My experience is that complete documentation plus patience and politeness can make the process easier for all involved. Most services for adults with disabilities will be funded through Medicaid, and eligibility starts on the person's 18th birthday. Medicaid is the insurance that pays for community mental health services, which I'll talk more about in a moment. Any services that your young adult may need, including paid staff support, will be paid for by Medicaid. Home and community-based services, which are provided through the community mental health system, means any service that will allow your young adult to live as independently as possible in their own community, not in a hospital, institution, or other isolated setting. You want to make sure that these benefits get put into place while you are able to help apply and work out any issues that may arise. A crisis is not the time to try to put these things together. You want these benefits to be in place and ready to use. Medicaid is jointly funded by federal and state governments, but it's administered by the state, which means that exact benefits can vary from state to state. In Michigan, we are very fortunate that Medicaid will cover physical therapy, occupational therapy, and most prescriptions. Dental care and applied behavior analysis may be covered up to the 21st birthday. Recipients of supplemental security income are automatically enrolled in Medicaid. If a parent or guardian already provides insurance through an employer, then Medicaid will become the secondary insurance. If your young adult is uninsured, then Medicaid will be their health plan. If your young adult isn't enrolled yet and you have general questions about Medicaid, call the Michigan Enrolls hotline here, or if your young adult is already a beneficiary, you can contact the beneficiary helpline, which is also on this slide. Go ahead and take a screenshot to save those numbers. SSI recipients will be automatically enrolled in Medicaid. But sometimes there are circumstances that necessitate applying separately for Medicaid. For example, a person may decide not to apply for SSI but still needs health coverage. Or some people may be denied SSI the first time they apply, or even if the application is smooth sailing, it may take 6 months or longer for approval on that first try. But what if your young adult has a medical emergency before SSI gets approved? For that reason, I've included the application process for Medicaid here. Young adults can apply for Medicaid as soon as they turn 18. You will have to register on the MyBridges website, michigan.gov/mybridges, with a username and password. The young adult will answer the questions on the form as an independent adult without the parent's income. Approval can happen quickly, and you'll receive the My Health card after approval. Medicaid is always the final payer on covered services. If Medicaid is the primary insurance, you can select one of the health plans, but if your young adult is already covered by another plan, then Medicaid will become the secondary insurance, and you don't have to do anything, just use the My Health card. Once you've got SSI and Medicaid in place, you can start thinking about community mental health services. Community mental health services are administered by individual counties in Michigan, and they are offered to people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, or substance abuse disorders, or mental illnesses, who also have Medicaid. So here's where the Medicaid comes into play. The services and supports that you need will most likely be paid for by Medicaid through the community mental health system. Services can include supports coordination or case management, which is a person who helps to link you up with any support or service you may need. This can include paid staff who provide community living supports, or transportation, or skill building, or supported and integrated employment programs, respite services, and peer supports. Paid staff is probably one of the biggest things that Medicaid and community mental health provide. That means hiring paid staff to provide whatever assistance is needed to increase or maintain your personal self-sufficiency, to participate in the community, and to be productive and as independent as possible. Paid staff can be provided in a person's home or out and about in the community. For home and community-based services provided through community mental health, Medicaid will be the only payer. And here's our next action item. Before you apply for community mental health services, make sure that Medicaid is active. There is no online application for community mental health services. You and your young adult together will have to call your county's access number and go through the screening process over the phone. To find your local community mental health service provider and enroll, go to the website for the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan, www.cmham.org. Then click on Membership, and on the drop-down menu, you select CMHSP Directory. There, you'll see a list of all the counties in Michigan with the contact information for each one. Scroll down to the access phone number for non-crisis services for your county. Access staff will ask screening questions about the applicant's disability, and you'll have to have the Medicaid ID number handy. At the end of the screening process, you will choose a supports coordination agency, and an in-person appointment will be scheduled with that agency. Another way to find your community mental health agency would be simply Google. Google the name of your county along with the phrase community mental health, and your local agency should appear in the search. With SSI and Medicaid applications approved and community mental health enrollment completed, your young adult may then become eligible for other statewide or local programs. This was a very pleasant surprise for me when my son became an adult, and these are some of the programs that we've discussed with my son's supports coordinator. Make sure to ask the supports coordinator if there are additional services to help your young adult reach their transition goals. Request recommendations whenever possible from physicians, friends, community mental health, teachers and guidance counselors, your city hall clerk, parks and rec administrators, or your public library. Because maybe there's a book club or an adaptive fitness class that's a great fit for your young adult that they can tell you about. Remember also, you can invite anyone you choose from any agency to participate in the IEP and provide input about transition. The support is out there, but it's up to you now to track it down. For me, I found the most support from the parents whom I met in my son's special education preschool program. Even though our children went to different schools all over the county, they also went through the transition process around the same time, so we were able to compare notes and share everything we learned with each other along the way. A few of my friends even became regional parent mentors for the Michigan Alliance for Families. For those who don't know what that means, Michigan Alliance for Families has trained mentors in every area of Michigan who provide special education information and connections to local resources. And you can contact your regional parent mentor by calling our 800 number for Michigan Alliance for Families, and your call will be directly routed to your local mentor. So some of the programs I found are listed here. MyCAP is the Michigan Combined Application Project for adults with disabilities through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. This is a simple one-page application in plain language for food assistance, voter registration, and a few other programs. My son was able to fill out this application with minimal help, and he received a bridge card so that he can go grocery shopping for his own food, and now it's one of his favorite activities. CHAMPS is the acronym for the Medicaid Home Help Provider System. The Home Help program is for people who need physical assistance with daily living tasks, such as feeding, shaving, showering, and getting dressed. So first, the young adult applies for adult home help, and then the family members can register with CHAMPS to get paid for providing home help services to the individual. Transportation to medical and therapy appointments can be provided by Medicaid. You just have to call the number on the back of the Medicaid card several days in advance to schedule it. Public transportation for people with disabilities may also be provided in some counties or cities, often through the Senior Services Department for a small fee per trip. The Rehabilitation Supports Waiver, or HAB, is a Medicaid program for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities who require extensive supports to live as independently as possible. The waiver covers community living supports and even in-home nursing care. The person's supports coordinator will initiate the waiver application if appropriate. The Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE account, allows qualifying Social Security recipients to save money without penalty. The funds can only be used for the benefit of the person with a disability for personal expenses. Job Corps is a federal program for vocational training in specific careers and trades. There are 3 training centers in Michigan. This is just one example of formal vocational training. There's also the statewide Project Search for training in skilled trades, And MRS operates the Michigan Career and Technical Institute north of Kalamazoo for young adults with disabilities. The Bureau of Services for Blind Persons also has a vocational training facility in the city of Kalamazoo. The Michigan Developmental Disabilities Institute, MyDDI, offers free training for teens and young adults in self-advocacy and independent living. This is just a sample. Some of you may know of additional resources that are not listed here. The point is, ask about available resources and keep on asking. There are many different approaches to life after high school, but whichever path your young adult chooses, the goal will be increased participation in community activities. Let's talk briefly about some options for life after high school. Don't think of these options as either or. The goal of adulthood is to develop skills and pursue new experiences in the community. So when a person starts with one set of activities, it may lead to a completely different experience in the future. One option for life after school is community employment. When looking for a job, it certainly helps to know your community and to be resourceful. Sometimes it takes people working together to find a good job. If you're still in the midst of transition planning in school, the IEP team can talk about ideas for finding community employment. Skill building programs, sometimes called day programs, are available through community mental health agencies as well. These types of programs are focused on skill development rather than immediate employment. Some examples of skill development that could be addressed at a skill building program are attendance, following instructions, completing tasks, staying safe on a job, and problem solving. Supported employment is a model of employment that pays minimum wage or above and provides people with more complex disabilities the appropriate ongoing support that's necessary for success in a competitive work environment. Support could be continuous, intermittent, or it can diminish over time. It can also include job development, which means developing a job for someone with a specific skill set. Supported employment can also include job coaching. A job coach is someone to be at your job with you, to help you learn the job, or to help with tasks that you need assistance with. Supported employment takes place in the community at a paying job, and sometimes supported employment programs will provide transportation, but not always. Post-secondary education might involve trade school, a certificate program for food service, an apprenticeship, community college, or a four-year college. College tuition is an out-of-pocket cost, and there are some four-year colleges that now offer specialized programming for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. With competitive integrated employment, the worker is compensated at or above minimum wage, receives the same level of benefits as all employees without disabilities, performs similar job duties with similar training as all employees, interacts with employees who don't have disabilities, and has the same opportunities for advancement as all other employees. The worker may be eligible for job development and job coaching services from Vocational Rehabilitation, and the job coach will be faded out as the worker learns their job duties. All of these options involve knowing your local community, making connections, and learning new skills. This may include recreation, volunteer work, and socializing with friends. Community participation will always be a lifelong goal. So, how do all these pieces fit together to create a fulfilling life for our young adults? Benefits like SSI and Medicaid will help pay for a quality life, and community mental health services are available to provide the assistance needed to live that life. Community mental health can also provide guidance on housing, whether that means independent living in a staffed apartment or a group home or a more creative solution. Food assistance can be funded through programs such as MyCap for those with disabilities or MyBridges for anyone who qualifies. If your student is unable to drive, transportation to medical or therapy appointments is available through Medicaid. Transportation to a community activity, such as grocery shopping, a concert, or the mall, is also considered a community living support that can be funded by Medicaid through community mental health. Some cities also provide scheduled transportation for a small fee for people with disabilities. If your student is in an 18 to 26 program in the school district, skill building will be part of the curriculum. Once a person exits the school system, community mental health can provide skill building programs during the day for adults with disabilities. After your student exits the public school system, education can still continue at a trade school, a college, or a nonprofit agency such as the Disability Network. For job placement in either supported or competitive employment, an individual can work with a vocational rehabilitation agency. In Michigan, the choices are Michigan Rehabilitation Services for most disabilities, or the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons for people with a visual impairment or deaf blindness. My favorite area of support is recreation, because there's always something happening somewhere. Get in touch with Parks and Rec, visit the county fair, find a wheelchair accessible trail at a state park, join a book club at the library, volunteer with a scout organization. Whatever your interest is, there's something out there just for you that can really enhance quality of life. Transition planning is meant to provide opportunities for creative problem solving and support during school so that the student will have a plan and any assistance necessary to achieve their goals in the long term. The work you do during transition planning will only help make things smoother as you go into adulthood. When you were in high school, how did you develop a vision for your future? Most likely you tried some different things, you met some people, or participated in some organizations, or got a part-time job. Your action item here is to find those people or organizations that can help your student create a vision and articulate those ideas in any way possible. Start with a vision, a dream, or a goal, and then build your transition plan from the ground up, always keeping an eye on that vision. If you're looking for skill building, get a referral from your supports coordinator, find out where the day programs are, learn about the skills they work on. Talk to other families to see what local services worked well for them. If you're looking into employment, go out and mention to some business owners that your young adult is looking for a good fit. My own son got a job by talking to the caterer at a friend's graduation party. The caterer turned out to be the regional manager for a major restaurant who happened to be training new staff that day. Figure out what type of workplace would be attractive to your young adult and which workplaces would welcome you and provide the support that your young adult needs. Talk to your vocational counselor about the type of work environment that you would like. Talk to your counselor or a disability transportation provider about how to coordinate getting to and from work. Whatever you decide, stay involved in your community. Even during the pandemic shutdown, I was taking my son out for day hikes at state parks where he likes to do nature photography. He was able to continue music therapy and his creative writing group online, and we volunteered at a food pantry and at city park cleanups. All of these activities are part of the networking that leads to future opportunities. And these are the activities that make life more meaningful, which promotes physical and psychological health. As parents, we have to think not only about annual IEP goals, but also the long-term goals, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line. I like to joke that the transition to adulthood begins in preschool because that's when we build the foundation for a person's unique spin on life. Start early on chores and self-care. If your student likes pressing buttons, for example, teach them to load the dishwasher and turn it on, or load the washer and dryer and turn it on. Then build upon that chore. Expand it to folding laundry, putting away clean dishes, or scrubbing pots and pans. Consider types of education that may be pursued in the future, after exiting the school system. For example, maybe your student will be ready to start preparing for a GED exam. The GED has 3 parts that can be taken separately: English, civics, and math. A few of my son's friends were unable to complete a diploma, but were able to complete a GED later. Or maybe your young adult isn't ready for trade school now, but may be ready at age 25 or 30. Keep that option open. Keep developing interests that may lead to a specific vocation. Students who earn a diploma may still need a few more years at home to develop their independence, perhaps taking some college classes and working part-time before moving out. One of my son's classmates who had an IEP moved into a student co-op house in a neighboring city and enrolled at a community college before transferring to a 4-year college. She needed a transitional period near her parents that was also away from her parents. Vocational programs, apprenticeships, community colleges, and even 4-year universities offer a wide array of programming, both for students who earn a high school diploma and students who exit with a certificate of completion. As parents of students with disabilities, we have to think outside the box. Just because I did things a certain way when I turned 18, it doesn't mean that my son has to follow the same path. As parents age, it may be time to come up with creative housing solutions. For example, getting a house with an attached apartment to give the young adult more independence, or getting 2 apartments near each other, or finding a place without stairs. My family moved to a walkable downtown area so that my son could get a sense of independent living. Have open, honest conversations about what you'll need as you get older. At age 26, you also have to decide if the young adult will continue on a parent's insurance plan or if you want to make Medicaid the young adult's primary insurance. Estate planning, either with an attorney or using templates from your local library, can give peace of mind as parents age. Contact your local ARC for a referral to an attorney who can help with estate planning for families of young adults with disabilities. No one actually enjoys thinking about estate planning, but it's important to do because none of us will live forever. That is the reality of the situation. My husband and I have often said through the years, we hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Your young adult is still learning and growing. What isn't possible now may become a reality in the future. Conversely, your young adult may have a health setback that will cause your family to reprioritize everything. In fact, that's what happened in my own family. It's our job as family members to consider all of the what-if scenarios and to make sure supports are in place just in case. Strengths, preferences, interests, and needs are always changing. The spin is what makes life fulfilling for all of us. It's also our job as families to encourage interests and find out what makes life meaningful for our young adults. I often like to point out that sometimes those very specific skills and talents can lead to employment and greater participation in the community. The person who spins plates and balances spoons might enjoy working in food service. The person who flips light switches and presses buttons can learn how to use a camera or do laundry. The person who takes apart retractable pens and flashlights and bike gears could work in a repair shop. The person who takes delight in making a big mess may benefit from some art classes and could explore the skills needed to work in a t-shirt print shop. The truth is, none of us know where we're going, but when a door presents itself, we can open it and see where it leads. Here I share some resources and I encourage you to explore each of them. Michigan Alliance for Families has a page on our website all about the transition planning process and alternatives to guardianship. The ARC Center for Future Planning has information on their site about mapping out our needs as we get older, and more specifically, you can use the Build Your Plan online tool to create an individualized plan for your young adult's future needs. I'm Determined is an organization completely dedicated to teaching self-advocacy skills, and they have worksheets and other resources to get students involved in the transition planning process. The PACER Center is a parent training organization in Minnesota that also houses the National Parent Center on Transition and Employment. The website has hundreds of printable information sheets on all aspects of transition to adulthood for families. Finally, Think College is a national organization dedicated to improving inclusive higher education options for people with intellectual disabilities. They have really interesting resources as well for college planning. Even if you think college is out of reach, I encourage you to explore the Think College website because you might be surprised to learn about what assistance is available to students with intellectual disabilities. Those are the slides that I prepared for today, and I want to thank everybody for watching. I first compiled this information by comparing notes with friends who also had children with disabilities going through the transition planning process, and I've been adding to that information in my work at the Michigan Alliance for Families. But I'm sure that a lot of information is still missing. If you have any questions or comments, please call our 800 number, 800-552-4821, to speak with your regional parent mentor about transition. I'm so glad that you took the time today to learn more with Michigan Alliance for Families. Please do not hesitate to reach out directly to your regional parent mentor for more information, or follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and check out the video library on our YouTube page. And please explore our website for all of the transition information. Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDEA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Our website is www.michiganallianceforfamilies.org, and our email address is info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org. Thank you so much for joining me here today.